What's up, guys? Welcome to a new Young Guns podcast episode. We are going to be talking about the Western Conference final between the Edmonton Oilers and the Dallas Stars. So there's one Canadian team remaining, and that is the Edmonton Oilers. So they beat the Vancouver Canucks in a thrilling series of 7 games. So they win game 7 3-2. There was optimism at one point towards the end of the game where Vancouver scored 2 goals, and we thought that maybe they would have been able to tie the game and force overtime, but unfortunately, that was not the case. But yeah, so in game one, the Canucks win 5-4. In game two, Edmonton ties up the series in OT 4-3. Um, Vancouver wins 4-3 game three. Game four, 3-2 Edmonton. Game five, 3-2 Vancouver. Game six, 5-1 um, Edmonton. And then game seven, Edmonton wins it. And then in terms of the Dallas Stars, they beat the Colorado Avalanche in 6 games. First game, Colorado wins 4-3 in overtime. And the Dallas Stars blew a 3-1 lead in that game. So, they could have won the series in 5 games, but that didn't happen. The second game, they tied the series 5-3. Third game, they win 4-1. Game four, they win 5-1. And in game five, they lose 5-3 versus Colorado, and in game six they win in overtime, scored by a goal from Matt Duchene to make it 2-1, and they win the series in six. So there's one thing I'll say before handing it to Zach and to start our analysis. The Two things could be said about both these series wins. Brock Besser, who was probably, Vancouver's top three player within these playoffs, unfortunately was diagnosed with a blood clot. And I think that really took a toll on the team in game seven, and it showed. And in terms of the Colorado Avalanche, losing Nuchuskin again during the playoffs, especially when he was so key in the first round, I think that really hit the Colorado Avalanche very hard as well. So, losing two key players like that are so offensively gifted, definitely, I would say, contribute to their losses. But at the end of the day, you're a team, you're supposed to win as a team. Colorado did get Jonathan Drouin back. So, he, did the best he could have done as well. But they had some reinforcements there. They just couldn't get the job done. Dallas was arguably the better team. And in terms of the Canucks versus the Oilers, um, you know, at one point, Vancouver had Edmonton against the ropes. When Stuart Skinner was shitting the bed, like it looked like it was in Vancouver's favor to win the series. They had Silovs, who is a third string goalie, coming in for the Smith and Demko. Demko was injured for majority of the first and second round, only played one game in these playoffs. So we're like, wow, we're gonna see something magical here and see a third string goalie, take down the Edmonton Oilers, and it's gonna be an upsetting, a series loss to the Edmonton Oilers, and we're gonna start posing all these questions again, like Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl. Are they ever gonna win a Stanley Cup with the Edmonton Oilers, or are they gonna have to go elsewhere? And unfortunately for the Vancouver Canucks, they fell flat on their face. Picard did win them a game. They went back to Skinner, and the rest is history. Look, Stuart Skinner obviously is not a Vesna caliber goalie, but he did what he had to do, and the team in front of him did a fantastic job for considering the circumstances. And in terms of the Dallas Stars, they're obviously the most complete team, in my opinion, that is left standing. They have a solid playoff performer in nets in Jake Ottinger. We've seen what he's capable of doing in past playoffs in 2023 and in 2022. Um, their defense is solid offensively and defensively, and they have the deepest forward core, in my opinion, from first line to fourth line. So, obviously, there's a lot of optimism for Dallas to, beat Colorado in that series, which they did, and they exposed Gorgiev, which we said that, you know, um, that was a possibility, even though Gorgiev did bounce back after that horrible game one loss versus the Winnipeg Jets. He bounced back. So, and I don't think he did the worst job ever in the series versus Dallas, but it's clear that Jake Ottinger outperformed Gorgiev. So, Zach, I'm going to throw the ball into your court. And what were your thoughts essentially on those two series leading up to this Western Conference final?
Well, Dallas, despite the fact that the top goal scorer after round one, like you mentioned, Val Nichushkin, had to step into the player assistance program. Colorado got absolutely rattled and quite frankly smoked, because in game one they did have a 3-0 stranglehold on the game. Midway through the second period, things excuse me, Dallas had a 3-0 lead, and Colorado turned things around and won that game in overtime, which led us to believe that Colorado, anytime they get hot in a game, anytime they could start scoring in bunches, they become really dangerous. We saw that effect in round one, and then it opened the eyes of the masses to think, okay, well, this is going to be a very competitive series. But from games second on, just until that elimination game that Colorado took back, Dallas was absolutely phenomenal. They boast a very good penalty kill with a power play that is at 29%. 29% puts them among the top 5 teams recorded in the playoffs. And other than that, this is a team that plays extremely well under Pete DeBoer. They're getting a lot of contribution from just about anybody, from their top 9 forwards to the defensemen. Miro Heiskanen, big shout out to him, was great in the series against Colorado. Jake Ottinger has been great in the playoffs. There's everything to love about this Dallas team. There really is.
And remember,
And
we
they're
were
coming up.
talking about like Hintz and like having to step up. Well, he was a lot better in this series as well.
Yes, he was. He scooped up, I think, maybe 5 or 6 points in this series alone. I'm sure you'll have the stats on the screen, but
Yeah.
yes, they needed guys to step up. Obviously, Wyatt Johnson was the guy to step up for them in round one. Now they've got more of a balanced contribution. Stankonen got involved in there. Tyler Seguin stepped it up a little bit. Obviously, Jason Robertson did his thing. Like, everybody is kicking right now on this team, and
Yeah.
if you compare them head to head in different categories against Edmonton, well, you'd say, oh well, look, they do a lot more things than Edmonton could do, which is true. But we'll turn the corner to Edmonton now. Edmonton is a team, right, that has 2 fantastic star players. Probably, I'm very confident to say that Evan Bouchard has reached a level of status as a difference maker based on what he's done in this regular season, but also in the playoffs, how reliable he's been, whether it's getting a goal or just being fantastic and an asset on that power play. Because yes, I mentioned Dallas's power play has been phenomenal, but Edmonton have the number 1 power play in the playoffs, bolstering a conversion percentage of 37% right now. That is a key asset for them. And McDavid and Draisaitl are scoring. You would like Edmonton in this series. The big challenge for them will be, okay, well, are there third and fourth line and their depth scoring guys, are they going to really be able to hit? Because they haven't. Losing Adam Henrique was a big loss for them, because Adam Henrique is the guy they brought in to add that secondary scoring, and he's out. There were some question marks whether he was going to play the game 7 against Vancouver or not, but he may be available at some point in this series. It is still, there's not a lot of information that's out there, especially during the playoffs when it comes to injuries. So we'll just have to see how this situation plays out. But Edmonton is, having Stuart Skinner between the pipes is not great at all. And we saw kind of a series against Vancouver that was flipping both ways. Edmonton takes a game, Vancouver takes a game, and a lot of those games were determined by which team's goaltender wasn't as reliable. And Stuart Skinner hasn't been great in the playoffs, but despite that, Edmonton find a way to win games. They're in the position that they are now. It's um, I believe it is the second. Yeah, it's the second time in the past 3 years that they're going to be in the Western Conference Finals. 2 years ago, they got swept by Colorado. Hopefully, this year they don't. As you know, fellow Canadians here, we'd like to see a Canadian team succeed. The last one to win was obviously the Canadians in '93, but Edmonton are really up against a big challenge in Dallas. And if I have to put a prediction on this series, I would say that Dallas were to win this one um, in about 6 games.
Oh boy. Edmonton fans are not going to be happy with that. Look, you said it best. Fellow Canadians. Like I know a lot of people said in their comments, like, well, if if there's a rival in Canada, I'm not going to go for them in the playoffs. Sure, that's true. I'm a Montreal Canadian fan. You're an Ottawa Senators fan. We hate Toronto. Did we go for them? No, we didn't. So
No,
yes, in that regard, yeah, we took your advice, guys. Like we did not go for the Canadian team when Boston faced them, right? But any other team, not named Toronto, you know, we've been rooting for them. I was really hoping that Winnipeg would upset Colorado. That didn't happen, and Edmonton and Vancouver. Well, you're at a stalemate. Like one Canadian team's coming out, which kind of sucks in my opinion because like it
yeah,
forces one to a Canadian team to eliminate the other. So then you'll have less of a chance of seeing a Canadian team winning the cup. So like, look, we could like they Dallas is the most complete team, like I was saying before. The New York Rangers have a great goaltender. They have great offensive defensemen. They have a great top six. Their bottom six, not the greatest. Florida, they have a great top six. Their defense is very underrated, defensively, but offensively, it's not the greatest. Even though Gustav Forsling has been playing great, and their goaltending in Bobrovsky, overall, it's great. Even though in the playoffs he's been not as great as he was in the season, but still very
got to
solid.
step up.
Yeah, if you want to compete, with the likes of Igor Shesterkin, and in terms of the Edmonton Oilers, they're great offensively, but their biggest weakness is their goaltending. And I think defensively, with adding like guys like Ekholm and and Brett Kulak, in the recent years, does make them a better team defensively. But it's not their defense the problem. It's not even their depth forwards anymore. That's a problem. They've improved in those aspects of the game. It's their goaltending. And I just pulled it up here. Stuart Skinner, his goals against average 2.87, and then his save percentage 881, and he's a starting goaltender and he's ranked 16. And if you look at the other goalies that are still in it, Bobrovsky's ranked 10. You have Shesterkin that's ranked 11th, and Ottinger is ranked 6th. So Ottinger right now is the best starting goaltender that's left. And
In terms
and
of goals against average,
yeah,
obviously that fluctuates a little bit with the save percentage, but yes, Jake Ottinger is been consistently great in the playoffs. Maybe just a few hiccups over there, but I wanted to take attention to, you were mentioning Edmonton's blue line. I wanted to say how much of a disappointment it's been that Darnell Nurse only has 2 points in 12 playoff games this year. A guy who's making over $9 million annually, and the production is just not there. Darnell Nurse is known to be this big physical defenseman who could move the puck and who could contribute offensively, and it just hasn't been the case. And another disappointment is where I'll disagree with you on their bottom six is, look, I'm looking at it right now on our screen. The combination of Warren Fogle, Ryan McLeod, Derek Ryan, Matthias Janmark, all of those guys have combined for their bottom six. Their most recent active bottom six has combined for 8 points total in these playoffs. That's just not good enough. And Dallas is bolstering a third line with a guy like Tyler Seguin. They got Evgeny Dadonov there. Um, they have players on all four lines, and they could get really creative with it. Because if you're playing against Edmonton, honestly, what you have to worry about is that, especially in this playoffs, is that top line with McDavid and Hyman and Ryan Nugent Hopkins and their power play.
Yeah.
And well, maybe Draisaitl could do things on his own as well. But you know, Dallas is in a position where they only if they can neutralize a couple of things against Edmonton, Edmonton is going to be really in a vulnerable position here, and especially considering their goaltending is not good at all. I said 6 games. Now thinking more about it, I think Dallas could even win this one in 4 or 5. I know I'm rooting for
Okay.
Edmonton. I'm Canadian. I really like to see McDavid be able to have a shot at the Stanley Cup in his career, but the facts in front of me are saying it's not going to happen. The same thing is going to happen. It's more likely than not that the same thing is going to happen when they played in the conference finals 2 years ago. They could get swept here. Dallas is just that damn good.
Well, you mentioned before, like Henrique being injured does not help their bottom six because he was a great piece, and for me, Corey Perry is the guy who disappoints me the most in the bottom six. And I know I mentioned before that the bottom six has been an improvement, and it has in the regular season, but come playoff time, like they're having a hard time like clicking, to be honest, and they're getting more production from their defensemen than their bottom six. Like that's a problem. There's there's an imbalance there. Connor Brown, probably one of the worst signings of the free agency. I literally saw a highlight. I was watching the game yesterday. And I watched the highlight again this morning. He's on a breakaway, and instead of trying to pick a corner, decides to shoot directly on Silovs. Like, are you serious? Like, I don't know. Warren Fogle, he's been pretty disappointing as well. He had a pretty good regular season, and playoffs hasn't been able to translate that success. Darnell Nurse at this point being a -10, being paid how much he's getting paid on that contract with only 2 points, arguably top three in terms of worst contracts in the league. So, like, look, they have an amazing top six, and it's great to see that Evan Bouchard has 20 points, which is the most in NHL history by a defenseman through the first 2 rounds of a single postseason. That's a great, little like fun fact about how well Evan Bouchard's been playing. And another thing I would like to mention is that because of the most points through 12 playoff games, the two other defensemen who've gotten more than 20 points during this stretch, Brian Leach won the cup in 1994 with the New York Rangers, and 1985 Paul Coffey won with the Edmonton Oilers. So can we see history repeat itself? It's possible, but goaltending, bottom six, need to be better. Like just taking a look at the Dallas Stars lineup right here. Do you see one weakness? When Sam Steele is getting you points in the playoffs, that's when you know this team is deep. Okay. Joe Pavelski had 0 points in the first round. He got on the score sheet. He got 3 points. Matt Duchene started picking it up. He was a clutch player, gets the OT winner, eliminates the Colorado Avalanche. Logan Stankoven picks it up. Wyatt Johnson continues to be on a tear. Rupe Hintz continues to he woke up and started doing much better. Like everyone, the bell was rung, and everyone stood up and said, "I want a piece of the cake." Evgeny Dandonov, another guy. The vets, the young guys. This is a team that I like a lot because of their mix of youth and veterans on this team. And another guy that probably has become one of the best trade deadline acquisitions at this point, Chris Tanev. He's doing exactly what he needs to do. He's a +8, and he's playing amazing defensive hockey. And I know we said it in the Colorado episode where Colorado has offensive minded um defensemen alongside with defensive minded defensemen, but you know Dallas is more defensively minded, apart from Thomas Harley and Heiskanen, but it's working. Their
Yeah,
defense is solid. And playing that solid defensively in front of a goaltender like Jake Ottinger, this makes them even harder to score on. So I know Edmonton is known for, having one of the best power plays, especially in this year's playoffs. And they're offensively gifted and they have two of the best players in the world. But when you're playing arguably the best defensive structure apart from the Florida Panthers, like they're gonna limit your chances, which means they're gonna limit the amount of goals that are scored.
potentially, yes, and that is going to play a big factor in this series. And another thing I wanted to touch on is that Rupe Hintz was having a great second series against Colorado, but in game four he left the game. He left late in the game, I believe. He's been a victim of an upper body injury, and he did skate on Monday, and he should be. You could expect him to be back at some point in this series, but even the crazy thing about this Dallas roster is that even with Rupe Hintz out of the lineup, who's a guy making about $8 million on their cap, he's somebody that they're trying to build this team around. Your top three centers right now are Matt Duchene, Wyatt Johnson, and Tyler Seguin. Like there's no falling off, and their winger depth is there, and obviously Rupe Hintz is a big part of this team, and they were able to finish the last series without him. But getting him back in round three would be crucial for them. I know they also had an injury on their blue line. Give me a second here. It was Yanni Hakanpää, who's been out with a lower body injury. His status is a little bit more uncertain than Rupe Hintz, though.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add that, if you want, and this is not knocking on the Rangers could surprise here, but not knocking on the Edmonton Oilers. But if you want to see arguably the closest and best Stanley Cup final that we've seen in a long time, if you want to see a 7-game series guaranteed, in my opinion, the Dallas Stars versus the Florida Panthers. Both teams have depth. They're good defensively. They're good offensively, and they have two great starting goaltenders. If you want a 7-game series, and you're literally gonna have the hardest time differentiating who is the weaker team and who's gonna come out victorious in that series. Those are the two teams. Like, you give me, if that's what the final is, and we do this video, like, I don't know who to pick at that point. I'm just gonna be like, well, at that point, whoever stays the healthiest is gonna be the victorious team at that point.
And that's usually how it works. The team that is really able to complete the marathon, because this is a marathon, not a sprint, and the team that is able to get to the finish line with, all the most of their team still there at the end of the playoffs, because all these injuries are happening and a lot of players are playing through it. But I think this is a discussion to have, obviously,
Yeah.
after round three, to see how things are going to shape up. The Rangers are obviously on a high horse right now. That series is going to be tough for Florida, nonetheless. We mentioned our predictions in the last video, but yeah, as for this series, all the advantage on my end goes to Dallas, and I think they're going to win this one
I, I
pretty
say
convincingly.
I say because of Edmonton's top six, and you have to give it to them. Draisaitl, McDavid, and Bouchard are the best, and even Ryan Nugent Hopkins, according to stats here too, are the best playoff performers. But it's going to take more than just that, because Dallas is spread out everywhere in terms of where
Yeah,
they get their production.
and Edmonton are going to have to really elevate to, especially McDavid and Draisaitl. We know how special they are. If they could elevate to a level where they're basically unplayable, then that is their key to success. As you know, as it's been their key to success almost all the time, this is what has to happen for them. because those two players are special, and
And yeah,
they're gonna need some help. But if Connor McDavid only has 2 goals right now in the playoffs. I know he has about 19 points, but imagine Connor McDavid in a let's say it's a close series and he starts getting on a tear. Um, that's when Dallas would start shaking in their boots a little bit. But
I
that's what's got to happen. They have to
I
they
will.
have to be unplayable. No line. If Dallas cannot shut
You mean
them down,
unbeatable?
then we're gonna have a longer series. What was
You
that?
mean unbeatable? You mean unbeatable, not unplayable?
Yeah, unplayable. Like you don't have like you can't defend against them. Like they're tough to play against. But yeah, you got the you got
Okay.
the gist of
Okay.
it.
Perfect. Okay. Well, look, I'll give credit to the goaltending for a second here. In games 1 to 3, Stuart Skinner went 1 and 2 versus the Canucks. Was goals against average was 4.40, which is horrendous. His save percentage was 793. Disgusting. After not playing games 4 and 5, coming back in games 6 and 7, they were 2-0, and his goals against average is 1.50, and his save percentage is 0.906. If he could be at a 900 level of for his save percentage and concede 1 to 3 goals a game, that's all Edmonton needs to win the series. If he's that type of
That
Skinner,
Yeah, it puts them on track to be more competitive. But to say that, okay, well, if they get good goaltending, it's still the Dallas Stars, right? It's there's a lot that needs to go into it for Edmonton to shift the tide.
yeah, it's a lot of what ifs, this and that. When we're making analysis, like you just have to like look at two aspects. You can't just look at analytics. You have to also look at the team as a whole, and that's what we try doing here when we try doing these videos. I know probably people have opposing views and they probably think maybe we're biased, we're going based off gut feelings, but that's not the case here. Like we literally are, as much as you root for this team, if you disagree with our takes, but it's factual, you may have to like look in the mirror and realize maybe, my team's not perfect, but if they do the little things right here and goaltending is average at best, my top players on my team could elevate us here to the Stanley Cup Finals. And I think that's the Edmonton Oilers need at this point. If they can play better defensively, which they series, if they can play like that defensively, and they're getting production from the same guys, and even I would even say something even better, where the bottom six starts getting on the board too, then we're having a whole different conversation here. That's where the Edmonton Oilers could seriously take out the Dallas Stars. But as of right now, we saw a small sample size of how good they could play defensively, how good Stuart Skinner could be, but in back-to-back games, and we still haven't seen consistent production from the bottom six. So there's question marks there. So it's up to the Edmonton Oilers to prove us wrong. I'm saying Dallas Stars win it in 6.
Yeah, I'll do my final one would I said 4 or 5. I'll stick to maybe I'll do Dallas in 5 as a final
I, I
prediction.
I think because of how offensively gifted the Edmonton Oilers are, they can definitely steal 2 games. And occasionally, Stuart Skinner could play very consistent, um, in terms of making key saves and playing at least average. And this is this is disappointing. I would say this is the last note I would make before we end this video. You have arguably the best top six in the league. So many talented players, two of the best players in the league, and or in the world, and Stuart Skinner's your starting goaltender. For me, that's unacceptable. This has been a problem for a lot of years. They've always tried putting guys like Jack Campbell and Mike Smith, even though he did a pretty decent job. They need better goaltending. And I hope that if they do get eliminated, they finally smell the coffee and say, you know what, we can't push this any longer, and we have to acquire ourselves a legitimate starting goaltender, or else McDavid and Draisaitl are gonna walk, or we'll never win anything with the Edmonton Oilers. So that's just all I have to say about that. But I think it's regardless. Apart from that, I think it's going to be a pretty fun and exciting series. There's going to be lows and there's going to be highs, like every single series that we've seen before. But Edmonton just needs to continue taking it one step at a time and build on game 6 and 7 if they want to beat the Dallas Stars. And in terms of the Dallas Stars, continue doing what you're doing, because I don't see any weaknesses as of right now. It's up to the Edmonton Oilers to prove us wrong and to start exposing the Dallas Stars and finding weaknesses on that team. So you have it. You have it here. So that's our coverage for the Western Conference Final. We hope that you guys enjoyed what we had to say. Um, Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Also, make sure to indicate who do you think was going to win the series and how many games will it take and who the MVPs are. Do you have anything else to add, Zach, before we conclude today's episode?
No, I hope we have a fun series here, and we can't wait to hear the feedback. The feedback on recent videos has been great. So guys, keep it up, and we appreciate all of the support here.
Yeah, and we always said the longer the series, the better it is. So um, hopefully these series last 6 to 7 games, because it's going to be exciting. So we'll see what happens. And we're looking forward to covering the Stanley Cup final whenever that is announced in terms of that matchup. So until then, take a look at our previous matchup video of the Eastern Conference final between the Rangers and the Florida Panthers. Let us know your thoughts on that as well. And we'll see you in the next episode of the Young Guns podcast. Thank you so much, guys, for watching.